So welcome to this latest video 162 Maths. In this video we'll be going over the GCSE Maths higher topic of statistics, going through some typical and common exam style questions. Now as always I'll include a link in the description below so you can access these questions, and I strongly recommend you have an attempt at them to see what you know and what you don't know about the questions covered. So let's get straight into this GCSE Maths higher revision of statistics audit of exam questions. So looking at question 1, it says that Naga states a hypothesis: most people read more than 100 books in a year. She asked a sample of 5 people in a book club how many books they read last month. The table shows the results. For part 8, it says show how Naga could use the data to support her hypothesis. Now a hypothesis is just an opinionated statement, so her opinionated statement is this. So more people read more than 100, or so I should say most people read more than 100 books in a year, and we want to prove this statement. So she's collected, asked 5 people from a book club how many books they read in a month. So let's see if we can pair this up with 100 books in a year. So if you look at the average books read in 1 month, then what we need to do is add up all the numbers. So 10 plus 11 plus 8 plus 10 plus 13, and then we're going to divide that all, let me just make that 13 a little bit neater, plus 13, and we're going to divide that by 5 people. So if I then type that all into my calculator, I get 10 plus 11 plus 8 plus 10 plus 13, again answer 52. And 52 over 5 is 10.4. So if that's the monthly read in 1 month, then the yearly is going to be 12 times 10.4. And if I work that out, I get an answer of 124.8, which is more than 100. So this supports Naga's hypothesis. Now for question 1b, it says give 2 reasons why the sample should not be used to support her hypothesis. Now for this there are loads of different ways in which you could give your reasons, but remember that they've got to be 2 distinct reasons and they can't be linked between the 2 for you to get the 2 marks. So for this I'm not going to write down what my typical answers will be, but I'll say what a range of some common answers are going to be: that the sample is too biased, in the fact that we know that they all read books, so all book readers, and I should say all avid book readers, all keen book readers. You could say something along the lines of that the sample is too small, so the sample size is too small, and you've got asked less people, so it'd be better if she asked more people. You could say something along the lines of that not all books will be read at the same rate, or people read differently in terms of their patterns. You could say something along the lines of that the month may not be representative of the entire year, because obviously you may find that people tend to read more in the summer because they go on holiday. You might say that some people may read more in the winter because there's less to do outside and people are most likely going to be in. So there might be some seasonal variation when it comes to people's reading patterns. So again, there are loads of different reasons that would be accepted for the 2 marks. So again, as long as it makes sense and it's applicable, you should be fine to get the 2 marks for this particular question. Moving on to question 2, it says the music festival has taken place each year from 2011. The table shows the number of people who attended each year. The festival organisers draw a time series graph to represent the data. The first 4 years have been plotted, and it says for us to complete the graph. Now to save a bit of time, I've plotted the graph pre-hand. So your graph should look something like this. Now again, key things you want to do is you want to try and make sure you label as close as possible to the values. Now obviously each little box going up represents 100, but looking at the data that I've then got to plot in terms of plotting these 4 points, you can see the number of people aren't that nice to plot. So just try and get as close as possible. Then what you want to do is, once you've plotted those, is join the points up with a straight line with using a ruler, and you should end up with something that looks a little bit like this that you can see on the screen, but I would say definitely a little bit neater, as it's quite difficult to do this on the computer. Then for 2b, it says use the graph to estimate the number of people who attended the festival in 2019. So what you want to do is you then want to project where this point is going to be. So you could say something along those lines. So we're looking at, this is 2019, so we're looking at around this mark here on your prediction. Now I would say, in terms of looking at the mark scheme, they would accept any answer between 4,200 to 4,500. So anything along that region will be accepted for the 2 marks. But I certainly would write down 2019 and also draw your projection line of where you think that line would be for 2019. Then moving on to question 3, it says a histogram is drawn to represent the heights of a sample of women. 3 of the 4 bars are drawn. The bar for heights between 170 and 180 is missing. There are 74 women in the sample. Complete the histogram. Now for this question, what we need to do is we need to work out the frequency. Now the frequency is basically the area of the bar. So what I need to do is I need to work out the area of each of these bars. So for this first bar, it's basically, as it's a rectangle, it's just simply base times height. So that's going to be 5 times 2, 5 being the width, 2 being the height. So there's going to be 10 people or 10 women in there. For this second block, I don't know why I'm writing with a highlighter, so let me just stop that. So for this second block, I've got a base of 10 and a height of 3. So that's going to be 3 times 10, which is 30. And for this third block, I've got a base of 5 and a height of 4. So that's going to be 5 times 4, which is 20. So then to work out the number of people, or should I say females, so the number of women between 170 and 180 is going to be 74 minus 10 minus 30 minus 20, which gives me an answer of 14. So then to work out the frequency density, it's going to be the frequency, which is 14, divided by the class width, which is 10, which equals 1.4. So what I then need to do is find 1.4 on the graph and then draw with a ruler, which I'm clearly not doing, and that there is my 4th bar, which should have a height of 1.4 and a width of 10. So that should be 1.4. There we go. Moving on to question 4, it says here is some information about the test marks of 120 students, and for part A it says complete the cumulative frequency table. So what we need to do is do a running total. So how many from this set of data is below 30? Well, below 30 is going to be 40 plus 26 plus 20, which is 88. How many are less than 40? Well, that's going to be 20 plus 40 plus 28 plus 20, which is 108. And how many are there altogether? Well, there are 120. It then says for B, draw the cumulative frequency graph. So as you can see, I've plotted each of these points against the upper bound of each of the groups, so at 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So all that's left for me to then do is to carefully join these points up with a smooth curve. And again, you might just have to excuse me as this isn't the easiest to do on the computer, but I've got something that looks like this. Then for 14C, it says students who scored 15 marks or fewer take another test. Use your graph to estimate how many students take another test. So 15 marks is here. So I need to project up from 15. And then my answer is going to be whatever number this is here. And I would say any answer roughly around 30, but generally speaking, they would accept whatever your answer is from your cumulative frequency from 15, and make sure you're drawing your lines and using a ruler. But I get that value there. So I've wrote roughly 30, but again, as long as you've drawn your lines on your cumulative frequency diagram, you'll be fine to get the full marks for that question. Then moving on to 5C, it says here is some information about times people took to complete a survey. And it says Ben draws his box plot to show the information, and the question is asking us to make 2 criticisms of his box plot. Now with this, all what you want to do is just make sure that it's been plotted correctly, check the values as if you were drawing it yourself, and that's usually where the criticisms will go from. Other things are more obvious ones are not labeling the scale and not drawing the correct shape. In other words, forgetting the upper and the lower region values, may potentially outliers if there are any. But in terms of this, the 2 main criticisms you should be able to spot is that the median is plotted incorrectly, and so is the upper quartile. So the upper quartile plotted incorrectly, in which it should be 7 plus 8, which is 15. Then moving on to 6A, it says Amari and Ben each play a game. Here is some information about Amari's scores. The lowest score was 12, the highest score was 20, lower quartile was 13, upper quartile was 19, and the median was 17. Draw a box plot to represent his scores. Now I've drawn the box because obviously on the computer it takes forever. So this value here is my lower quartile. This value here is my upper quartile. The median value is 17, so that's the line in the middle. And the lowest number was 12, and the highest number was 20. So all I then need to do is just join those whiskers up, and I should have something that looks like this. But again, make sure you are using a ruler to draw those straight lines. It then says for B, this box plot represents Ben's scores. Who had more consistent scores, Amari or Ben? Work out the interquartile range to support your answer. So for this, if we look at Amari's interquartile range, so IQR, so that's going to be 19 take away 13, which is 6. If I then work out Ben's IQR, which is 15 take away 12, which is 3, so therefore, as Ben has a smaller IQR, he is more consistent. So something along these lines should be good enough to get you the 2 marks. Then moving on to our last question, it says that a cafe owner records the average monthly temperature and the monthly sales of soup over a year. The scatter diagram shows negative correlation. Write down the relationship between average monthly temperature and the monthly sales of soup. Now, because it's got a negative correlation, basically it means that as the monthly temperature increases, the sales decrease. So that's exactly what I need to write. So we just need to write as the average monthly temperature increases, soup sales decrease. Then for the final bit, it says the average monthly temperature for the next month is predicted to be 7 degrees. Use a graph to estimate the sales of soup that month. So again, what we need to do here is we need to draw a line of best fit, and it's really important that you do draw a line of best fit, and you just want to try and draw a line. It doesn't have to go through 0, but you want to try and keep it as as straight as possible, as close to as many points as you can. And this is where having a clear ruler in your pencil case when you're in exams comes in handy, rather than one that you can't see through. So here I should have roughly the same amount of points above the line as I do below. So that's 6 above and 6 below. So I'd say that's probably about right, maybe. Then what I then need to do is I then need to find 7 along the horizontal axis. So each little box of 2 represents 1. So there's my 7. So then I draw a line, and make sure that you are drawing these lines on your graph, because they will give you the marks for it. And then as soon as it hits your line of best fit, this answer here is your answer for part B. And I make that out to be roughly around about 480, maybe. But I would say any answer, whatever value this is, they would accept for the 2 marks. So you get 1 mark for drawing your lines from 7 going up to your line of best fit, then drawing a horizontal line and then reading off whatever value that is. So if it's nowhere near 480, should be relatively close to that, but that will be fine. But again, as long as you're drawing those lines and use your graph, it should be good to get the full marks for that question.